Hilchos Parah Adumah Perek Shishi, the laws of the red cow, chapter 6. Forgive me, I'm a little weak this morning. The winter seems to be setting in on me. I didn't have a chance to prepare as much as I would have liked to for today's chapter, but Rambam goes on, day in, day out. It doesn't stop for nobody or for nothing, so here we are, and we'll do our best as we do every day. We are at a point in these halachas where the Rambam has finished talking about the ash, the preparation of the ash. You take a Parah Adumah with all of its specifications, you burn it in a very specific way, and now you have the ash. The next part of the process, before we get to the actual sprinkling, is to go and fill up water, special water that was going to be used for the ash to mix with. Then you have to actually mix the ash with the water, and then you have to actually sprinkle it. Those three stages are called in halacha milui. Milui means filling up the water. Then you have what's called kiddush. Kiddush means sanctification. That's the act of mixing the ash with the water. And then you have hazah, you have the sprinkling. So the actual sprinkling we're going to be getting to in chapter 11. From now, for the next couple of chapters, we're going to be dealing with the filling up of the water and the kiddush, the sanctification of the water by mixing in the ash. Besides for learning about who is authorized to do the filling up and the sanctification, a big chunk of today's chapter deals with the water, the type of water that's used in filling up and in sanctification, and also the utensil which is used in that process, because Torah makes it very clear that there has to be a keli, a halachically significant vessel that's used in the process of filling up and sanctifying the ashes, which is going to create a whole set of laws, which utensils are okay and which are not. And that's the focus today. So the Rambam begins, halacha aleph, hamayim shenoishnin alav efer hapara. The water upon which the ash of the Parah Adumah, which we've just spoken about now for 5 chapters, ultimately that ash is going to be mixed with water. So this water upon which the ash is going to be placed, ein memali noisan ella bikli, it must be filled up with a utensil. And it also must come from umin hamayonis, either from a freshwater stream, or min hanaharis hamoishchin, or from rivers. Moishchin literally means that pull, but it's a reference to flowing very strongly. The rivers have to flow strongly. They can't just be a regular calm stream. Because, shenemar as it says, v'nosan olav mayim chayim el keli. You place live water into a utensil. So 2 things here. First of all, there has to be a utensil. Second of all, the water has to be considered live water. It's only considered live water if it comes from a freshwater stream, straight from the ground, or at least from a river which is flowing very strongly, which shows it's a sign of life. That's one version of the Rambam here. Others, I believe you have it also, based on the Kesef Mishnah, they have the text, Oymin hanahares hamoishchin mehen, or from rivers that channel off of a freshwater stream. So in that case, it's just 2 descriptions of fresh water, either the mayon itself or channels that branch off from the mayon. And then only that would be called mayim chayim. Okay. Once you fill up the water and you pour the ash onto that water, hu hanikra kiddush. That act is called kiddush. This is the kiddush. You're holding the bowl of water, you're pouring the ash into the water. A very important code word. Going forward, you have to know this term. The water, once it has the ash placed on it, they're called by 3 names. Either mei chatas, water of the chatas, that's a code word for Parah Adumah water. Umayim mikudashin, sanctified waters, once the ash is mixed in. Before the ash is mixed in, they're called mayim she'enan mikudashin, they're not sanctified. Once they have the ash inside, they're sanctified. Vehem shakran hakasuv mei nida. And they're also, the term that Torah applies, mei nida, waters of sprinkling. I picked just one verse, it's a bunch of times in that passage, it says the word mei nida. That's a reference also to the water after it's already been sanctified with the ashes. So we have the terms for filling up, for the sanctification, and the basic law that it has to come from live water and done with a utensil. Halacha beis, before we get into more detail about the water and the utensil, first let's talk about the person. Hakol kshedim lemales hamayim. Everybody is kosher. Everybody is fit to take part in the ceremony of filling up the water. Chutz mecheres sheita v'katan. Besides, for a deaf mute, mentally unstable person, and a child, those are the 3 classic categories of people which can never participate really in any mitzvahs which require intent. Which raises a question, because if you remember from chapter 2, that Rambam talked about the children who grew up in a secluded area and they were the ones who filled up the water. And as we discussed then, some say that because of this question, they were actually a little past bar mitzvah. The hakol ksherin lekadesh. Additionally, anybody can take part in the kiddush ceremony, the sanctification of the water by putting in the ashes, chutz mecheresh sheitev v'katan, except for, again, a deaf, mute, mentally unstable person and a child. Kesef Mishnah over here writes that the word v'hakoil comes to include even women. It's not clear why he writes it over here, not on the first hakoil, but I guess the same thing applies there. Women also are included under the rubric of who is allowed to do the milui and who is allowed to do the kiddush. But now returning to the vessel, the ein memalin ve'ein mekadshin ela bikli, both the filling up of the water and the kiddush has to take place with a utensil, the ein mazin ela mikli, and also the sprinkling. The third and final step, which we're going to learn about later on in chapter 11, also has to be done from a utensil. You can't just sprinkle it with your hands. The hamilui ve'hakiddush ksherin balayla, the filling up of the water and the sanctification of the water may be done at night. Aval ein mazin ve'ein toivlin ela bayoim, but the sprinkling and the immersing may only be done by day. Which immersing are we talking about? So either we're talking about the immersion of the person who became impure after he sprinkled with the Parah Adumah water on day 3 and day 7, he has to go to the mikveh. That mikveh has to be done by day. Other Rambam texts have the word matbilin. Matbilin means immersion of the hyssop. Part of the sprinkling procedure is going to be taking three bunches of hyssop. See if I have a picture over here. No, but okay, we'll get to it. 3 bunches of hyssop and immersing it in the water and then sprinkling it on the person, here it is, who requires impurity. So this matbilin, this requires purity. So this immersion needs to be done by day. You can't, let's say, dip the azav in the bowl while it's still halachically nighttime and then wait till sunrise and then do the sprinkling. Both the mazin and the matbilin have to be done by day. But once you're in the daytime, b'chol hayayim kosher lahazav, b'litvila, all day is kosher to have the sprinkling done and to have the immersion done. Again, whatever the immersion means, from sunrise to sunset, it's all okay. Halacha gimel, b'chol hakelim mimalin umazin umekadshin. All utensils may be used, even utensils that are not susceptible to impurity. They may be used in the process of the Parah Adumah, filling up, sprinkling, and sanctification. Afilu biklei glolim, even utensils that are made from animal dung. Klei avanim, utensils made from stone. Klei adama, utensils made from earth that are not fired in a kiln. That's called cheres. Adama is where it's just dried up in the sun. Ubi svina, and even a boat. A boat, if you think about it, is a massive receptacle, so you can fill up Parah Adumah water in a boat. Ve'echad klei cheres, ve'echad kol hakelim. It doesn't matter if it's a pottery utensil, which cannot be immersed in a mikveh ever. Once it becomes impure, it stays impure, or any other utensil. It doesn't make a difference. As long as it's a kli, as long as it meets the criteria of being a vessel, a utensil, it may be used in the Parah Adumah process. Aval ein memalin, ve'ein mekadshin, ve'lei mazin, but we cannot fill up the water or sanctify or sprinkle b'dafnais hakelim, in things that, while they happen technically to be able to hold liquid, they're not made for that purpose. That isn't their purpose to be a receptacle. For example, b'dafnais hakelim, walls of utensils which broke. So here you have a wall, it's shaped in a receptacle shape, it can hold water, but doesn't classify as a kli here. V'lei b'shulei hamachatz, nor with the bottom of the machatz utensil. The machatz utensil was such a utensil that in the back had a little handle area, but technically that handle was an indent. You can turn it over and use it to hold liquid technically. Doesn't qualify for this. V'lei b'megufas hachavis, nor with a barrel stopper. This is a barrel stopper. On the top, there was a little hole in there for you to stick your finger in and be able to maneuver the stopper out of the barrel. Even though there's a hole, technically speaking, it could hold things. Doesn't qualify as a keli. V'lei b'chafnav, not with your open hands. A cup full, right? It's shaped like a receptacle. No, it's not a keli. V'lei b'beitzas hatar negoilas, nor with a chicken egg of a hen. Let's say you cracked it open in a way that remained somewhat receptacle-like. You can't put the water in there. V'lei b'sheikes shebesela, and not in a trough that develops naturally in rock near a stream. Many times you have a stream going, and then right over the border of the stream is like this little hole where some water gathers, and animals can drink from there. It's like a little trough. It's like a heaven-made trough. It's not made by man. That doesn't qualify as a keli for these contexts. Aval beitzas hayotzrim ksheira, but the potter's lump of clay. Potters typically, when they would lump their clay together in order to get ready to form it into a utensil, many times the shape that it would adopt was some kind of lopsided receptacle-like keli, and that is considered to be a utensil, mipnei shehi kli adama, because it happens to be. It's an earth utensil. May not have been fired up, may not have been purposely made for that intent, but it's a keli, it's a receptacle, and it works. Halacha dalid, not only the bottoms of pottery utensils, but shule klei eitz, or klei schuchis, or klei etzem, also the bottoms of wooden utensils, glass utensils, bone utensils, ein mekadshin bahen, we cannot use them for kiddush, for sanctification of the ash and the water. Ad sheyoshuv oisan v'yisaknem, unless you file them down, fix them up, v'yasim kelim b'fnei atman, and make them utensils in and of themselves. So let's say you take this wall of a utensil. As it is, it's just a broken shard. But once you file it down and you make it into, it's like a nice little cute bowl. Now it assumes an identity of its own. It could be used as a keli. Same thing if you were to take the barrel stopper. And even though there's a hole there that's not used for utensils or for receptacles, you decide to use it as a receptacle. Now you could use it for sanctification of the ashes. Ubeitzas hanamis, an ostrich egg, even though we said that a hen's egg is no good, that's because it's not so firm. It can't survive for so long in that state. But an ostrich egg, which is so big and so firm and so strong, it's kosher to have the ash and the water mixed into it. And if that part, which is the holiest part, may be done, needless to say, it can be used for filling up the water and as a bowl from which to sprinkle the water on those that are impure. What happens if you have a utensil and you take it and you attach it to the ground, either to earth or to rock? Even if you attach it with a very, very strong plaster, which basically makes it one with the ground. Doesn't matter. It doesn't lose its status of a utensil. You can continue to mix Parah Adumah water and ashes in there and sprinkle from there. What happens if you take this utensil and you make a rim around the utensil? So you've basically increased the height by putting a rim around the rim. And the water continues to rise till they actually reach the level of the extra rim. Now, in context, the Rambam seems to be talking also about this case, where it was attached to the ground and you added a rim. But the truth is, as the commentaries point out, it's equally applicable to a regular utensil, when you added a rim to a utensil. What's the law of this rim? Says the Rambam, if the rim moves automatically together with the utensil, meaning, if when you move the utensil, the rim is fastened strong enough to it that it will go right along, then the water that's inside the level of the rim is kosher, because the rim has become part of the larger utensil. The water is in an earthen utensil, which is fine. But if not, if when you move the utensil, the rim will not go along, it's not fastened so tightly, it may as well be considered as if you just built a rim, a wall, with the floor as the ground, with the ground as the floor. You put it on rock or on earth, and you filled up this rimmed area with water, where of course it's disqualified because it's not in a utensil. In order to be considered kosher water, it has to be in a utensil. The way the Rambam phrased it is that you have to move the utensil and see if the rim moves along with it. Others interpret it the opposite, that you have to try to move the rim and see if it can schlep the utensil along with it. If it can schlep the utensil along with it, that's a very strongly attached rim. If not, that's a weakly attached rim. When it comes to pottery utensils, so we've actually had this law before, that once a utensil gets a hole, it could lose its status as a halachic utensil. When it comes to kli cheres, what is that amount? So it's what's called a koines mashke, allows liquid to seep in. If you have liquid inside the utensil, it's very easy to make a tiny hole and the liquid will come out. But to get liquid to seep in, the hole has to be a little bit bigger. So that's the amount to make a kli cheres considered to have a hole. By the way, how do you measure if liquid could seep in? The Talmud says that what you would do is you would take this utensil and you would put it into another utensil, a larger one, that's full with water. And when you dip it in, if the water would seep in, then you know that liquid could seep in. So kli cheres shenikav b'koines mashke, if a pottery utensil got a hole, the size that allows liquid to seep in, ein memalinu mekadshin ba, can no longer be used to fill up Parah Adumah water or to sanctify the ashes with the water. Avolim nikav b'moitzi mashke. But if it got a hole with the size to let water out, it's a smaller hole, mekadshin ba, you may still use it to sanctify the waters inside it. So why the Rambam picks kli cheres here. There's some discussion in the commentaries if it means specifically a pottery utensil. This law wouldn't apply to other utensils, or it also applies to other utensils. The Rambam is speaking the common case of the pottery utensil, but that's another discussion. Halacha zayin kli shenikav milamata. Let us say that you have a hole, you have a utensil which got a hole at the bottom. Ustamei bismartutin, and you sealed it with cloth. Puzzle. This sealant does not work, and it still makes the utensil considered to be disqualified. Because when the water will rest on it, they're not resting on the circular bottom of the utensil, they're resting on the stuffing, in this case the cloth. However, but if it has a hole from the side, and you sealed the hole, you stuffed it on the side, it's kosher to fill up and to sanctify and to sprinkle from it, because in this case the water, at least up until the whole area, is resting on the bottom of the utensil. Now, the commentaries point out that this hole being discussed in this halacha, the size of the hole needs to be smaller than the size of the hole mentioned in the last halacha. Because once the kli will get a nekev b'kainis mashke, the whole thing will be disqualified no matter where it is. It's no longer a utensil. So it makes for a bit of an interesting case where the Rambam is talking about a hole that's so small, not even allowing water to seep in, and just the fact that you stuffed it with cloth disqualifies the utensil, because that part of the water is not resting directly on the floor of a utensil. Halacha ches hazoylef mayim min hamayon biyadav uveraglav. If somebody splashes water from a fresh water stream using his hands and his feet. So he has a bowl that he wants to fill up with water. Instead of going like a normal person and filling it up, he goes like this. He splashes on the water, and the liquid now enters the barrel. Ubacharasim, or if he does the same with a pottery shard. Takes a shard, throws it into the water, boom, it creates a splash. From the splash, liquid enters or water enters into the barrel. The Nasam L'Seichachavis puts it in the barrel. Psulin says that Rambam, this is disqualified because they weren't filled up using a utensil. Yes, they were filled into a utensil, but the utensil wasn't used in the filling up process. Similarly, if you placed the barrel into the water, and you pushed the water with your hands or with your feet, you caused it to divert. Or using some vegetable leaves, so they should go and channel in to where the barrel is. That's disqualified again. It wasn't filled up with a utensil, it was filled up with your hand or with the leaves. Same thing as if you dunked it in water. I couldn't find the term for this in English, maybe somebody knows. We did it all the time as kids. You take a cup and you put it into water using the bottom so it displaces the water. And then the moment the water rises to the level of the top of the cup, the water immediately flows in. That's what he describes now. He sunk it in the water. So the water overpowers on the sides and then goes right in to the barrel. That's also psulin. That's also disqualified because you haven't used a utensil to fill up the water. But if you did the diversion with reed leaves or with walnut leaves, which are not susceptible to impurity, the water is kosher. This is the guiding rule in this case. If something is susceptible to impurity, then if he used it to help the water to fill up into the utensil, the water is disqualified. But if he helped it along with something that's not vulnerable to impurity, then the water remains kosher. Somebody diverts part of a freshwater stream into a little pit or into a little collection area right off of the stream. Then he goes and fills up the water from this pit. Psulim, the water is disqualified. Because the removal of the water from the freshwater stream at first needs to be done in a utensil. Here what happened, it first went into a pit, and from the pit it's going into your utensil. That doesn't count. Halacha Yud Hayam Hagadol. The Mediterranean Sea, or the Atlantic Ocean, some say it's referring to, says that Rambam mikveh ve'enei kemayon is treated like stagnant water and not a freshwater stream. We're going to see this concept at length in the laws of mikvahs at the end of this book. You have mikvah. Mikvah means gathered, water that's stagnated. Then you have mayon, that's water that's fresh flowing. Only a mayon is considered live water for this context and can be used for Parah Adumah. This great sea, even though it's a massive sea, halachically it's considered to just be stagnated water, ve'enei kemayon, not bursting forth from the ground as a freshwater stream. Therefore, you cannot fill up from this ocean water that's going to be used for sanctifying the ashes of Parah Adumah. Additionally, all rivers that are not flowing strongly like a freshwater stream is are disqualified for using their waters to sanctify the ashes of Parah Adumah. But any other sea besides the Great Sea is considered like a freshwater stream. The water may be filled up from there. Halacha Yud Aleph, water that drags, that channels off, that branches off from other seas, which are called in halacha zeichalin, flowing, even though they came from a source which is called a mayon. According to halacha, psulin, this branched off water is disqualified. But if they branch off from a freshwater stream itself, they become considered like the freshwater stream, and they remain kosher to have the Parah Adumah water filled up from them. Halacha Yud Bey is a fascinating halacha. Mayim hamukin v'hamechazvin. Spoiled water, smitten water, and lying water. Lying means it dries up every once in a while. Psulin, they're disqualified for use completely for Parah Adumah. The Elohein hamukin, what's considered spoiled? Hameluchim haposhim, when they're too salty or too lukewarm. The hamechazvin, what's considered lying rivers? Him hamayonis. These are the freshwater streams. They do come straight from the ground. However, shepa'amim mikirim upa'amim charevin v'yeveshin. Sometimes they flow. That's what mikirim means. Other times they dry up, and they're completely parched. Afilu hayu charevin pam achas l'sheva shanim. Even if they dry up only once in 7 years, psulin, they're disqualified. Why? Why does the drying up later affect now? Because the water has to be mayim chayim, live water. If you're going to dry up at a certain point, that means that even when you exist now, your identity isn't so strong because it's going to come to an end. And therefore, even now, it's disqualified. But if they only became dried up in drought years, or more than once every 7 years, or once in more than every 7 years, once in 8 years, let's say, or the waters rose and fell. Lots of water, less water, but never, they never dried up, they are kosher. Now, why would it make a difference how long it takes to dry up? Once in 7 years is disqualified, once in 8 years is fine. So the Rebbe once explained something brilliant. The whole world, in essence, is a lying existence, because it's only created for a limited time, and then, as the Gemara says, chad charuv, it's going to be destroyed, at least in a certain sense. Which means that even now, while it seems to exist strongly and firmly, it has an element of kazav, an element of lying. So clearly, we can't demand that the standard be set that rivers should never dry up, as long as within the context of what world considers to be forever, which is 7 year cycle, because 7 year cycle is a full natural cycle. Once it lasts through a full natural cycle, that's already enough to consider it alive within the context of what this world considers to be alive, and it classifies as mayim chayim and can be used for the Parah Adumah water. Umayon hayotze batchila, says the Rambam, a stream that burst forth for the first time. Now you're telling me if it dries up later, it's disqualified. So what should I do? Should I test it? Should I wait around to see if it ever dries up? No. Kosher, right away, it's kosher. If you don't have to check. Maybe it's going to lie, maybe it's going to dry up. Halacha Yud Gimel mei bitzim. Muddy water. Literally mixed with dirt and mud. Umei hayarden, umei hayarmuch. The Jordan River water, the Yarmuch River water, also it's a river near Israel. Psulin, they are disqualified because they have water of mixtures. Water of mixtures means specifically that not just any other water mixed into it, disqualified water mixed into it. As the Rambam immediately says, what means mixed waters? Mayim kshedim, likidush. If you have water that's kosher for sanctification, and it got mixed up with disqualified water, you cannot use the total mixture to use for Parah Adumah water, even though part of it is kosher water. But if it's kosher and kosher water, like for example, the Rambam says, two freshwater streams mixed together, and now they became one big stream, it's all kosher water, so you can use it for the filling up of Parah Adumah waters. If waters became discolored or changed on their own, not because something fell in, just the air polluted it or whatever it was, kshedim, that's still kosher. That's not called disqualified waters. Tesvav be'er shenafal l'seicha charsis oyadama. You have a well into which it fell a bunch of clay, a bunch of mortar. And from this delivery of clay and mortar, the whole well became murky. So the question is this considered to be water that's changed? And as the commentaries explain, no, it clears up. Ultimately, the dust will settle, and the water on top will remain clear. So now one might think, okay, at least wait till it clears up. Says the Rambam, no. You can fill it up from there, from this well, with no need to wait until it settles, because it's for sure going to settle. However, if a torrent of rain fell into this well, which is also going to settle and clear up, but here, you have to wait till it clears up, till the rain settles at the bottom and the regular water is remaining. If you have a channel of water that comes from very far away, tiny channel, but you can trace it back and it comes to a freshwater stream, as long as it begins from a freshwater stream, it's kosher to be used in the filling up of Parah Adumah water. As long as you watch that no person should interrupt the flow. Which then turns out that you're filling up from water that while they're rooted in a stream, but their source has been cut off, shahin psulin, which means that they are disqualified. So you must make sure that it's still connected. And what's the lesson here? The mayon, that's our tzaddik of our generation, the Rebbe, is the source, the stream of all life. And sometimes people think you get too far away, you're in Wyoming or Utah or even in Sherman Oaks, and you're so distant. Maybe I'm disconnected from the mayon. Says the Rambam, no, as long as we can trace you back, even if you only come to have a thin flow, you remain connected, you have the status of the mayon, and you can purify other people.